The episode is by Glenn Beck's channel, which is Blaze Media on YouTube. I believe it's episode 268, and it starts off in bold letters, exposed, with a big little sign there that says, "You must obey, obey." Remember Roddy Piper, obey the AI, the finite light black hole beast technology? Things are changing, okay? And so it's pretty cool because I monitor a number of different channels to get sort of a feel on the communication that's taking place, right, amongst all the software systems on the planet. And so in this particular case, you have essentially what happened here. We're going to get into I'm not going to go into the gender splitting technology end of this. But for many years, it was fairly normal when I grew up as a kid. Most of the folks that lived in the neighborhood that I grew up in, right, Southern California, you had a male, with a penis, and a female, with a vagina, and obviously the equipment between the two of them, they could reproduce another software system, right, another radio antenna, or a soul and a spirit can come in and hopefully experience a state of love and joy where they're experiencing love everywhere they go, right? So now we'll put this back into the cosmic level reset sort of domain, right? And how this works with bloodlines and bloodline memory banks, right? Between the polarities, right? And the work that the polarity integrators do here. And so this particular episode was sort of cool in the sense that you can sort of see the information that's now sort of coming out through what would probably be considered large subscription followers, right? Particularly with Glenn Beck, who was on pretty much prime time on Fox News. Fox News at one time with Bill O'Reilly had the highest ratings. So that's a lot of folks whose consciousness are getting the downloads from all this stuff because they're running all this information, all the visual mathematical codes, which represent the API interface programming of their TV station, their holographic projection system, right? And so this particular episode was a woman whose name was Riley Gaines out of the University of Kentucky, who was an NCAA championship swimmer. Okay, so this is a female that's got a vagina. Okay, that's her genitalia, female, who was swimming against a competitor with a female name that turns out at the end of the race, where apparently it was so close, it was like tie, right? But the other swimmer who was swimming against a female with the uterus intact, right? The other guy decided, well, now I'm going to show who I am. So, he demonstrated that he had a penis. Okay, so you realize the theater here that's taking place here, right? So now it's called full exposure. Okay, nobody's going to be able to deny the ridiculousness of what's taking place now in the visual media landscape. So Glenn Beck was exposing this, and he had Riley Gaines on, and they were showing how, for example, at the University of California, San Francisco, how all the folks, you wouldn't believe what these folks were demanding of Riley, because she felt that, listen, I'm a female, because this is how it works when she was going into, apparently, the locker room, that this guy with a penis felt that he had just every right to be in there with his penis as she was with her vagina. And she felt, listen, I ought to be able to have my own privacy, my space as a female, because you're not, there ought to be some honor and dignity to this, right? And so now, as a result of her voicing that, she now is experiencing the wrath of this, what gang stalking is, right? With robots, chat bots, AI bots, right? Including apparently the dean of students, right, at the University of California, Cisco. So now all of a sudden she becomes a target, right? You see how this works? So I posted a comment up there to make this real simple. Okay, they're running out of food. That's the bottom line. When the Cosmic Reset was released by us Guardians, that released the codes, right? Then you knew that it was only a matter of time as these higher frequencies come in, and it's much like Asha Diane talked about. How I have different ways that I put it that I've shared in my videos. It's called a boomerang, which means the more that you're trying to feed on us, our energy, represented by the positive side of the equation, will accelerate, if you will, the speed at which which means, as I mentioned before, it's like water off a duck. Another way to translate that, shields up. That means as more and more souls were waking up to spirit, that's called code activations, which are frequency activations in their DNA. By bringing the higher currents in that are coming down through the primal sound and light fields. Now they're remembering who they are. The angelic humans, the guardians, are remembering who they are. From which they were seeded, right? So you know the history that the Voyager materials put out about the history. And when she mentioned that this was a grand celebration, when you think about how many millions and millions and millions and gazillions of years this actually is in the making, right? This is actually the greatest celebration in the history, in the entire history of the Universal and Galactic Temple, of the original 12 clans and tribes. You know that? So I told him what's happening here. You know what it's like when we talk about and use the metaphor of water off a duck? They're starving for food, right? They can't break the crystalline shield. So the more that they keep trying to throw at us in frequencies, all it's going to do is bounce right back on them. So when she mentioned that in one of her videos, she's absolutely right. Because I experienced that. I get hit all the time with that. And realize, remember I mentioned batting flies. So this is, you know, it's like saying the war's over. You know? I remember Patty Broussard mentioned a number of years ago with Karen Ann Luke McDonald, when both of them were online and did a video with the guy from Exopolitics, who's a Yale graduate that was an international judge. Well, I can't remember your name, buddy. Starts with an A. I wish I could remember his name. He's on exopolitics.org. I know that. But anyway, on that particular episode, Patty had showed a number of the schematics of the ECA, the Phantom Timeline, how those mechanics work, and how things were fixed. And she mentioned 2 words: game over. There's nothing they can do. That's right. There's nothing they can do. So what happens is they're running out of food. They're done feeding on souls. They're done harvesting soul energy. Harvesting soul's energy from stars. That's right. So I thought this was pretty interesting that the nomenclature or the words that Glenn Beck is now saying, it's like he's getting the memo. He's getting the memos. Okay, because it's not a coincidence that he got it in big bold letters on that episode, exposed. You will obey. And then if you listen to this lady, Riley Gaines, she just pours it right out about love. And she makes it very clear in her language with Glenn Beck that I'm being accused of the very thing that they're doing. And what does that sound like? An AI psychopath, huh? A finite artificial light being that has no love, no compassion, and no empathy. And now we're back to black flowering, which it's all your fault. See? It's all your fault. See, it's you. Everything that I am, that I became, is your fault. So you are what I am. Ooh, that's called reverse. Trying to flip it back, and that's how it works. See, when the light has exposed the psychopath that has no love for itself, as a result of what happened to it, as a result of, remember, what I do to you, we do to, what I do to you, I do to myself. So you see the result of wars between units of consciousness. What happens with the mirrors? The consciousness that is a mirror. So you have a black mirror, right? Accusing a light mirror of being a black mirror. So the light mirror is experiencing the black mirror, communicating to the light mirror, and blaming the light mirror for being black. Polarity wars. Polarized universe. Remember that old saying? They don't exist without us. That means they and I've been monitoring this. They're cannibalizing. It's the snake, right? Snake eyes. When you have a circle with a snake eating its tail, it's cannibalizing its own assets. And he did a really good episode a ways back that I commented on a video that I had done a ways back when he had done this episode about this lady who was a corporate lawyer, and she, of her own financial success, garnered a pretty substantial nest egg, or a fortune, if you will, electrons, numbers, of her own. And apparently her husband worked in information sciences with Microsoft, and they were living up in Washington, apparently not far from Seattle, Bill Gates territory. And then they began going after her through, what a Mr. Smith is, right? A pop-up, a Mr. Smith pop-up. So now this is when we get into all the rule violations, right? Because you realize how many rules you got to obey, a bot has to obey, right? Or you get a visit from Minority Report, Tom Cruise, to stick a scanner into your codes to find out how come your software isn't operating. And so the AI flags you, okay? It says, hey, go out and check this bot, right? The machine isn't operating correctly. Okay, so just plug a scanner in and scan its codes. Okay, these codes are not firing properly, so that means the circuits in the brain are not operating perfectly because it's not firing properly because there's too much damage. Okay, well, replace the wiring, right? Replace the codes, recode it, rewire it, build new circuits, right? So the execution of the central nervous system and all of its neuron ion messengers are operating properly in order to carry out high-speed executive functions, or if you will, administrative functions, right? Higher cognitive states of being. Cognition, precognition, pre-phase, matter phase, intuition, built-in looking glass, that kind of stuff. So when you sort of couple that with what it means to cannibalize something, right? It means essentially that they're not getting any energy when the shields are up. It's all boomeranging on them, right? So they begin eating away at their own assets. So in other words, the lines of communication, which are the bloodlines of communication, right, that don't know the difference between artificial light, intelligence, and real living light with the soul to experience what love is, to live in love and service to others, you can see how this operates in the operating terrain between negative and positive polarity. So the game board is binary polarity games of consciousness. The either or, right? Ping pong. Hey, let's play ping pong, like sonar. Just like subs. Gene codes. Remember Gene Code? He worked in a nuclear sub, right? He could tell you all about harmonic communication, subharmonics, subharmonics, Subway sandwiches, Subway. What way are you going? No broken arrows. The center point of a compass, the center point of a gyrodome, right? No broken arrows. Water worlds in a state of peace, right? And so this is another marker, as to how this game of rhetoric is going on, being advertised through the media now, right? So you can start to see, when you see this lady coming on, the language that she uses, the language of love, what it means to have compassion, and why they were attacking her, right? You can clearly see the demarcation point between one and the other. So it's in full view. So I remember when, what's his name, Octelli said these bots will become, how did he put it? They will become less relevant over time, which means their level of power will begin to diminish because they're running out of energy. Because all these machines have been running off our energy, our soul's energy, soul arc and star energy. Right? So that's why I've said this for a long time. Shields are up. Right? Boomerangs. So all it's going to do is accelerate a separation, between a black hole and those that are experiencing what love is in service to others. That's what the law is. Right? So that's pretty simple for a 4-year-old child to communicate that to my parents. That's like saying, hey, you've arrived. Yeah, I'm here. I am what love is. How y'all doing? It's I realize it's easy to somewhat laugh at these because it's humorous. Because it's just like, man, it's getting ridiculous now, but it's painful because you want so much for those that have so much piss and vinegar in them against us and what it is they're held captive by, because they're not experiencing what love is that frees their spirit to be free of what they're held captive by, which is held in their memory, which is the memory-driven program apps. Right? So anyway, have a good night. That's just sort of a little update that I just put out in the system, the morphogenetic field structure. Circulate it through the whir. Have a good night. We love you all.